Hey everybody, I'm Sam Gross with electricbikereport.com, and this is the all-new Aventon Soltera. It is a brand new electric city bike from Aventon that's designed to be very lightweight, very affordable, and all around just really cool looking. So we're going to put this bike through a gauntlet of tests today to see how it performs in the real world, so stick with us. Though the Soltera is Aventon's newest e-bike, it's actually paying homage to several bicycles from Aventon's past. Aventon hasn't always made electric bikes, and in fact, they actually made their name building traditional non-motorized bicycles. When I first started hearing the Aventon name being tossed around back in around 2012, it was actually from friends that I had that were neck deep in the burgeoning fixed gear scene in LA and Phoenix. They knew of Aventon because Aventon was building very cool looking, very functional, and very affordable traditional bicycles that were being marketed towards college age kids. People that didn't have a lot of money to spend on some ultra luxe, ultra lightweight bike, but they wanted something that looked and rode like it. Bicycles that were similar to the things that were being raced in now famous events such as the Red Hook Crit or the Wolfpack Hustle Marathon Crash Rates. Things that just looked very, very cool, but you didn't have to like totally eviscerate your wallet to afford one. This bike is not just paying homage to them, it's actually made in their image. There's several elements of the design of this bike that you can see that are similar to those old track and fixed gear bicycles that Aventon used to make. The most obvious one is going to be that larger down tube where the battery is housed. That looks similar to the Aero down tubes on the old Aventon fixed gears. There are many different parts of this bike. It just looks like a really nicely done traditional bicycle. There's also other elements of the new Soltera that we're seeing that are trickle down from the new Aventon Adventure that was released last year. High-end features like integrated brake lights in the seat stays, the very, very nicely done full color LCD display that we really grew to like of the Adventure. All of those things are on this bike. Now, because this bike is designed to be so affordable and so accessible, it is actually predominantly being sold in a single speed model, and that's the model that we reviewed here. You can also get in with a 7-speed drivetrain, and with that you get mechanical disc brakes, but this has caliper style rim brakes, and we'll dive into the performance of those later on in the video, but by and large, that's really it. This is a very simple and affordable e-bike, and I really, really like how it rides. So to get an idea of how well the Aventon Soltera comes to a stop, we're going to put it through a brake test where we bring it up to 20 miles an hour 5 times and slam on the brakes as hard as possible and take the average stopping distance. Now the Soltera, the single speed version of it, is spec'd with a set of Tektro caliper rim brakes, which are kind of an older fashioned style brake, but they should do just fine with this relatively lightweight e-bike. But let's see how it goes. So the Soltera did relatively well in our braking test, coming to a stop in 15 feet and 2 inches on average. That's about 1 foot better than our 16 foot 1 inch current average of all the bikes we've tested. As we suspected, these caliper rim brakes did just fine on this single speed, relatively lightweight e-bike. If you do want mechanical disc brakes, if you choose the 7-speed model of this bike, it does come with a set of Tektro mechanical brakes, but I honestly think these caliper brakes do just fine. So the Soltera is spec'd with a 36 volt, 10 amp hour, or 360 watt hour battery that's hidden inside the down tube of the frame. And to get an idea of how that battery performs, we put it through a series of range tests where we rode the bike until it died on PAS5 and PAS1. And on PAS5, the bike went for 23.95 miles before it died, and on PAS1, it went for 49.49. those are very impressive range results for a bike with a battery that's really not that large. It's a 350 watt rear hub motor, so it's not the most energy taxing motor setup, and it's a very efficient bike to ride, which again is going to contribute to that longer range. But an almost 50-mile total range, and our range tester said that that was done very comfortably. That's very impressive for a bike that just really doesn't cost that much and doesn't have big heavy-duty electric componentry that so many affordable bikes come with. So really great job from the Soltera on our range test. The Soltera's 350 watt motor certainly is not as large as the more popular 500 watt or 750 watt motors that we often see on affordable electric bikes. But in the city bike category, where we see often very lightweight and very affordable bikes, 350 watt is on the larger size compared to maybe the more average 250 watt rear hub motor. And that 350 watt motor does a really great job powering this bike around. This thing only weighs 41 pounds, so it really doesn't need a lot of oomph to get up to speed. It's a class 2 e-bike. There's a throttle as well that's also limited to 20 miles an hour. And I had no problem at all on PAS 5 or really anything over PAS 3 cruising along at 20 miles an hour. It's a really comfortable bike, and it even climbs fairly well, but we'll dive into that in more detail later in the video. But to get an idea of how this bike performed in each of its PAS levels, and this bike has 5 PAS levels, we put the test on the electric bike report circuit where we did a lap in each PAS level plus one with the motor entirely off. And as you would expect from a bike with fairly narrow tires, a very athletic riding position, and something that just doesn't weigh that much, it pedals really nicely without any help from the motor at all. Aventon actually advertises that if you wanted to, you could take the battery out and make this a fairly light commuter bike and just ride it with no motor help at all. And I could actually see someone doing that. It functions fairly well as a traditional bicycle. One complaint I will point out that we learned in the circuit test is that from PAS 1 through 3, you really didn't see that much help being given by the motor. We didn't see very large increases in speed. Honestly, this bike would probably do well being just a 3 PAS bike, something that we see very often with these smaller class 2 limited e-bikes. There's just not that much speed and power to be divided up. So I think if Aventon reprogrammed this to have 3 PAS settings versus 5, you might see a little bit more of an even breakdown. But also in our circuit test, we did see this bike put down a hot lap in PAS 5 that was very close to the bike's overall top motor assisted speed of 20 miles an hour, so a great result from the Soltera. The Soltera's cockpit is fairly standard among affordable electric bikes, but the centerpiece of it is that full color LCD display. Aventon debuted this display back over the summer of 2021 when they released the Aventon Adventure, and it's full color. It's got lots of little tidbits of information that we don't see on any other display, like how many kilograms of CO2 you save by riding an e-bike, how many trees that you save. It's not really pertinent riding information, but it's still kind of cool, and it makes the display feel different than the other ones on the market. We were really excited to see it on this cheap of a bike. Aside from that, it's got a fairly narrow set of riser flat bars, not so narrow that they're uncomfortable or have really twitchy handling, but narrow enough that it's got kind of that fixed gear aesthetic that was so popular. It's also got a thumb throttle on the left-hand side, a touchpad to turn the bike on and off, control the headlights, control your PAS level, and then some rubber lock-on grips. Handling-wise, handling is the big highlight of this bike, at least for me. I have a huge soft spot for these skinny tire, kind of road bike style, flat bar bikes. They just handle so fun. This bike really is inviting for you to carry speed through corners, to charge up hills, to try and dart in and out of traffic. Like I can definitely see someone who is living on a college campus that's crowded with lots of pedestrians just having a ton of fun with this bike. The motor also just feels like it suits it really well. It's not overpowering. It feels really nice. The whole bike just feels well thought out. So really great job from Aventon on the handling. To get an idea of how the Soltera performs on hills, we've brought it out to our test hill hellhole. And there's a couple of important things to remember about this bike. One, the 350 watt motor is not very large, but it should be enough to give this 41 pound bike enough oomph to make it up the hill. I do have questions on whether the throttle will be able to do it in our throttle only test, but I believe in PAS 5, I'm gonna be able to make it just fine. With one exception, I'm probably gonna have to stand. So keep an eye out for that, but let's see how it performs. The throttle only test of the Aventon Soltera. See what this 350 watt motor can do on its own up hellhole. Gotta say, I've got some concerns, I guess, over how far it's gonna make it, so we'll see. Already seeing a lot of slowdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Still trying her best. 4. Once we hit about 3, I usually call it, because that's about where I have to start balancing. 3.7, starting to have to balance, and that's all she wrote. All right, now for the PAS 5 test of the Soltera. Odds are good I'm gonna have to stand quite a bit. Pretty much immediately standing. So certainly having to put some effort in and definitely needing to stand, but it's not awful. That 350 watt motor is getting a good amount of help. I'm sure you can hear a little strain in my voice. Through the worst of it. Definitely would not be clearing this hill if I stayed seated, but this is not at all abnormal for a 350 watt bike. And that's it. So as I'd expected, the Soltera did fairly well for a single-speed e-bike on our test hill hellhole. In PAS 5, it made it to the top in 1 minute and 32 seconds with an average speed of 11.8 miles an hour. That's a decent result for a single speed with a 350 watt motor. I did have to stand. That's okay. A lot of these single speed city bikes that I've tested, I did have to stand on hellhole in order to clear it. So that's not at all abnormal. On the throttle test though, it wasn't able to clear the hill. Again, we kind of expected that. It did put up a good fight and make it about a third of the way up, but it did eventually kind of hit a speed where I was having to balance more than I was going forward, and we had to call the test. But overall, a good result for the Soltera. If you live in a really hilly area, it might not be the right bike for you, but if you live in kind of a flatter or an urban environment, it's gonna do just fine with the single speed gearing. I wouldn't worry about it too much on hills. Aventon gave me a hint that the Soltera was coming way back in the fall. I was doing an interview with someone in the marketing department there, and they had mentioned that they were building a bike that was going to pay homage to the fixed gear and track bikes that built Aventon's name. And I have to say, I have a long background in that world, in the bike racing world, and I'm so excited to see that they've built an e-bike that pays some respects to where Aventon came from, because Aventon does have a long history in this, and they did make some really, really cool bikes that I personally have friends that had them and loved them. It's so cool to see this Soltera be in existence now. And it's even cooler to have ridden it and know that it feels like those old bikes. It feels snappy and nimble and fast, and they didn't put some huge honking motor on it that totally made it so that you didn't have to pedal it. This bike still wants to be pedaled, and I'd very much say that's a good thing. I really think that anyone who's going to be interested in the Soltera is going to want it to feel like a traditional bicycle with just a little bit of help. And Aventon did a wonderful job in finding that balance between traditional bicycle that you still have to pedal and something that's going to give you help and be functional and utilitarian to get around town and get from point A to point B. I've really enjoyed the Soltera, and I'm really impressed with the price point of it. I also do like the fact that you can buy it in a 7-speed drivetrain with mechanical disc brakes. Believe me when I say I like the single speed. I like that it has caliper brakes. I wouldn't change that about this bike, but there are going to be some people, especially those that are more familiar with e-bikes than traditional bikes, that are maybe going to want gears and maybe want disc brakes and feel more comfortable with that. That's awesome that that option exists. For those of you that want to keep cost even lower and just get something that's a little bit more of a purist bicycle, this model, the single speed with caliper brakes, is just fantastic. I've had a ton of fun riding it. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more updates of new bikes and products and news from Aventon and the other brands that we cover. If you want to know more about this bike and the data that we recorded on it, be sure to click the link in the description below this video for more info on that. And for Electric Bike Report, I'm Sam Gross. Thank you so much for watching.